Today we'll be talking about a handheld console that a few people wanted me to do a video on, the PlayStation Vita. This is an interesting console since right now it's at that awkward stage of its life where you can't find it new anywhere, yet it's technically not discontinued somehow and still has games coming out for it. Is this really the time to buy a PlayStation Vita? Obviously, that's up to you, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who can argue a long time about when in a particular console's life cycle it would be best to buy, but this series isn't really about that. These videos are supposed to showcase what makes systems like this fun to collect for, play, and why they're interesting. And when it comes to gaming, in the end, it's supposed to be about fun. So with that in mind, let's take a look at what makes the Vita great, and why you should consider getting one for yourself. The PlayStation Vita came out a couple of years ago in 2012, so like the Wii U, even the earliest models are still pretty new. The system was supposed to be a handheld console that offered home console-like controls and graphics, combined with cell phone features like cameras and touchscreens. It's very much a modern interpretation of the PSP, which is why it should have been called the PSP 2, but of course they called it Vita. Why wouldn't they have done that? Maybe Sony will name their next handheld the PlayStation Portable 1. Originally, the Vita had a lot of different games coming out for it, but as the years went on, just like with the PSP, the Vita got less and less mainstream titles and became the must-have console for niche Japanese games. In comparison to the PSP, the Vita sprouted a second analog stick, front and back facing cameras, a front touchscreen, and a rear touchpad. Something that can't be seen as the 6-axis motion sensor inside. The UMD is gone, thankfully, and has been replaced with a cartridge. A very small cartridge. In terms of storage, Sony had the brilliant idea of making a memory card that only works with the Vita and costs too much. They start out as small as 4 GB, and the largest is actually 64. It also could do other things no one cared about, like remote play, and that PlayStation Now streaming nonsense. Overall, it has all the right controls, is plenty powerful, and has reasonable battery life, though that could be a little bit better, I guess. But then again, battery life could always be better, no matter what the device is. There are 3 different hardware releases. The first is the Fat Vita with the OLED screen. I like how the first iteration of Sony consoles are always called the Fat version. Many consider this one to be the best of the Vita consoles, though I disagree with that for a couple of different reasons. You could buy one with 3G connectivity, though that's not something anyone really cared for. And the first gen Vitas also have this accessory port which does nothing. At least nothing was ever released that ever plugged in here. As I mentioned before, it has an OLED screen, and I'm not exactly a fan of that technology. The screen looks really good, but over time, like anything organic, the screen deteriorates. Mine hasn't been used all that much, but you can already see how messed up it is, especially if there's a lot of black or dark on the screen. The blue color degrades the quickest, so that means the color balance actually changes as the screen ages. Plus, because the different colors degrade at different speeds, it's really easy to get a burn-in-like effect. So yeah, personally, I don't think this is the Vita to get. This is the one I prefer, though I actually don't own one. It's the Slim redesign. It lost the OLED screen and mystery port, but gained battery life, lightness, and much better buttons. I always found that the Fat Vita had buttons that were just a bit too hard to press on. Compared to a regular controller, a handheld console is heavier and isn't as ergonomically shaped, plus you have to hold the console up in a way so you can see it properly. Combine that with the buttons and hand fatigue becomes a very real thing, at least for me. You also get 1 GB of built-in storage, which is nice if you don't want to buy a memory card right away. You get the option to copy everything over once you do get one, and you probably do want to get one if you plan on buying games or DLC from the online store. Also, thankfully, the proprietary charging connector has been replaced with, just a regular micro USB port, so good on them for changing that nonsense over. The last Vita that came out isn't a handheld at all. In fact, it's not even called a Vita, at least not in North America. And that's the PlayStation TV. Here it is. It's so small you might accidentally inhale it. I actually have a problem with keeping the console in place because the weight of the cables just pulls it, off of where it's supposed to be. It connects to a TV with an HDMI cable, and you can use either PS3 or PS4 controllers. It outputs a 720p image, though I have to say the image actually looks better on a handheld Vita, even though the resolution is lower on those. I guess it has to do with pixel density and all that. Not all games are compatible with the PlayStation TV, which is a shame. If you want to record Vita gameplay footage, the PS TV is the cheapest method, though you do need a special box because of the whole HDCP thing. I actually did a video about recording gameplay footage off of all kinds of different consoles, so you can actually see that up there if you want to. There is a way to mod the original Vita to get a video out signal, but if you can't mod it yourself, it's very expensive. It's a shame that many Vita games just don't work on the PS TV. There is a way to mod the PlayStation TV to get rid of the whitelist and play any game you want, but honestly, I don't feel comfortable modding a console that still gets updates. Like, what if an update bricks the system or something? At the moment, I don't personally have a need to play video games on the go, so if it runs on the PlayStation TV, that's what I play it on. In terms of games, there's a lot to choose from. Many indie games and mainstream titles are available. Spelunky, Uncharted, Assassin's Creed, Final Fantasy, and things like that, but personally, it's the niche Japanese stuff that interests me the most. I got my original Vita in order to play Senran Kagura Shinobi Versus, as well as the Neptunia Rebirth and spin-off games. There's also Muramasa, Odin Sphere, Dragon's Crown, Disgaea, Valkyrie Drive, I might mispronounce this, the Atelier series, and Persona 4. All you need to do is type Vita JRPG in Google and you get a huge list of games. It's also region-free, so you can play imported games. DOA Extreme 3 and Moai Chronicle were games that many people imported the Asian release of because you can just switch it to English. Those games never made it to the West. And we still have games coming out for 2017, so there are still new games to look forward to. And the online store is still active, so you can get updates, DLC, and those games that are, digital only as well. If there's one thing, though, that's going to hinder physical game collecting for this thing, it's the price of the games. It's a bit of a surprise for such a recent system. Just off of the top of my head, I can think of 2 games sitting beside me on the shelf here that went way up in price in just a short time. There's our No Search Plus and Senran Kagura Shinobi Versus. They're easily over $100 sealed on eBay. It must have to do with the limited production numbers. But then we get to absurdity like this. Madden NFL 13 is $80 US sealed. That's a bit much for a sports game if you ask me. Physical games come in these really small cases. They hold even more minuscule cartridges inside. Also, there's a clip just to remind you that games used to come with a manual. It's blue, so it's quite obvious to see that this is a PlayStation game. I prefer more neutral colors, something Microsoft obviously doesn't seem to, but overall I found the blue not too distracting to look at. It certainly does its job in terms of being recognizable. If I see small blue cases in a store or on someone's shelf, I know they're Vita games right away. So the games are great, and the hardware, while having faults, is pretty decent as well, so why didn't the Vita succeed and instead die a slow death? Personally, I think it has to do with the fact that so many games on the Vita are cross-platform, and people prefer to buy the games for more powerful systems, whether that be the PS3, PS4, or PC. Vita to PC ports must be their own genre by now. Not only that, collecting for the Vita can be difficult because of those outrageous prices I talked about earlier. But in the end, it boils down to this. The PlayStation Vita is a very capable handheld system with proper controls and no obvious and terrible faults. It has many great games, and it's the only recent handheld that allows you to play home console quality games while on the go. And no, the Switch doesn't count because it's too big. People like to go on and on how terrible the Vita is, but the truth is that it just isn't terrible. A Philips CDI is terrible, and a Gamecom is terrible. But games run perfectly fine on the Vita, the console feels perfectly fine to hold, and the control layout is exactly as it should be. The only thing missing is those extra trigger buttons, and then it's like any other full-size console when it comes to the controls. There's so many people who don't even give the Vita a chance because of the negative things, that's been said about it. But whether you like the Vita or not is a decision you make yourself. That's not an opinion you should, ever let someone else make for you. If you've never played one before, try one out if you get the opportunity to. You might find something you never thought you were looking for.